Today we are going to look at the tides around Jersey. On the face of it, that may sound pretty dull, but the seas around Jersey are quite remarkable, and being an island with the sea rising and falling twice each day, tides play a big part in island life. Jersey has the third largest tidal range in the world, and whereas the sea rises and falls about 1/2 metre in the Mediterranean and 1.5 metres in Poole, in Guernsey the tide can rise 10 metres on a spring tide, and only a few miles away in Jersey seas can rise up to 12 metres in just 6 hours. And with that amount of water coming and going each day, it can bring with it powerful currents, dangerous overfalls and strong riptides. The Earth's tides are created by the gravitational pull of the moon, and depending on which phase the moon is in will determine the amount of tidal movement created. Full moons and new moons bring the biggest or spring tides, whereas neap tides, the smallest tides, occur at half moons. As a rule of thumb, the time of high water advances about half an hour each tide, or an hour per day. So, if it's high tide at 8 o'clock one day, it'll be high tide about 9 the next. But this is very much a rough measure. Sometimes it only advances half an hour, sometimes it's nearly 2 hours, and this is why it's so important to check the tide table. If you get it wrong, the beach you're heading for could well be several metres underwater, or if you're launching a boat, the tide could already be halfway down the beach when you get there. A quick note here about tide tables. Most tide tables are in GMT, Greenwich Mean Time, which means that in summer months, when we're using BST, British Summer Time, an hour needs to be added to the listed time. Another important thing to know about incoming and outgoing tides is that they are not constant. That is, they move at different rates depending where it is between high and low water. A rising tide starts slowly, then builds up speed until it's halfway between high and low water. Then it slows again as it approaches high water. So, on a spring tide, where the water might rise 12 metres, the water level will rise about 1 metre the first hour, 2 metres in the second hour, 3 metres in the third hour, and it will rise another 3 metres in the fourth hour, 2 metres in the fifth hour, and 1 metre in the final hour. That can mean that if the sea is lapping at your feet 2 hours after low water, there can be 6 metres of water on that spot only 2 hours later. Two other factors that determine how high or low the sea will come are the wind direction and air pressure, and these can have a noticeable effect on the tide height. Tidal currents vary hugely around the island. The strongest currents are found on the north coast, with the seas in some area moving at over 20 knots on a spring tide. The southeastern coast are somewhat more forgiving, with currents rarely exceeding 10 knots. Overfalls are where these fast-flowing currents collide, and there are several places around Jersey where the sea appears to boil, as rushing water going in one direction meets fast-flowing water travelling in another direction. Seas off the west of Bully Bay, around White Rock, and at St. Catherine's are particularly hazardous. The huge tidal range means that most of Jersey's harbours dry out at low water, a fact commented upon by Prince Albert in 1870. And it's not until relatively recent times that a deep water berth has been created at St. Helier Harbour. To most locals who have been brought up in this environment, the big tidal movement is completely normal. However, visitors, even those who live by the ocean in other parts of the world, can easily get caught out. The sea can appear to be miles away when a visitor parks their car on the slip, only to find the vehicle underwater or swept away an hour or so later. Similarly, Jersey has several bays where the unwary can easily get cut off by the incoming tide. Fortunately, casualties are extremely rare. Jersey has several lifeboat stations, an inshore rescue craft operated by the Jersey Fire Service, and locals always have half an eye out for the misguided or foolish. Recent RNLI figures show that they had 23 rescue incidents where people had been cut off by the tide in 2022, and after an awareness campaign that number was reduced to just 13 in 2023. In locations where one might get cut off, like Green Island, Jamvrin's Tomb, Elizabeth Castle, and even Seymour Tower, you'll be well above the high tide line and so in no immediate danger, if you stay put. However, it's being caught between locations that carries the risk. Places like the causeways from Elizabeth Castle, St Albans Fort and the Corbier Lighthouse, and anywhere at the low water line on the southeast coast. So a word to the wise here. If you're pottering in a rock pool on the southeast coast or exploring the caves at Plymouth and a local tells you that the tide has turned and you should be on your way, listen to them. It might just save your life. So far we've mentioned 12-metre spring tides, but to show how variable Jersey tides can be, it's good to note that neap tides can rise as little as 2.5 metres, and for the most part the tides are somewhere in between these two extremes. Over the centuries, Jersey has had a far greater presence in maritime history than its size should warrant, primarily because our seafarers were brought up in the extreme conditions of local waters. There can be few islanders, past or present, who have anything other than awed respect for the sea and the power it can wield. Well, that's the basics that you need to know about Jersey's tides. The island's waters are clean and clear and a great place for people of all ages to have fun and enjoy themselves. And if you know what the tide is doing, you can enjoy our wonderful islands, beaches and shores, knowing that you're safe. And that brings us to the end of this short video. If you found it interesting and informative, please click the like button and subscribe to check out our other videos. I'm Richard, and this has been brought to you by Jersey, a Guide.